What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the Diesel Podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube and aren't subscribed, make sure and click the subscribe button, like, comment, turn on notifications. Let us know what you think about the episode. If there's any follow-up questions you have or suggestions for topics or guests, we're always checking comments on YouTube. Love to be able to see your guys' feedback and then be able to incorporate them into future episodes. Today I'm going to be chatting with Amsoil and talking with them about a semi-synthetic oil that they have and going through the differences between conventional semi-synthetic and then full synthetic, and which what are the pros and cons of each, which one should you choose for your truck. So it's going to be a great conversation to chat with them and learn more. Before we get to it though, I want to remind you our friends over at Kershaw Knives have a 20% off site-wide code for you, just for Diesel Podcast listeners. Use code 20diesel at kershaw.kaiusa.com. Great way to save some money on some really cool gear. They've got a bunch of new releases that they've had this year, which we did an episode with them in January. If you're really into knives or in the market for one, definitely make sure and head on back to that episode in January and check it out. But their Duralock models are really cool. I've got my hands on some of them, and they use D2 steel for the blade, and there's a bunch of different textures. So depending, what kind of grip texture you like, they've got a ton of choices. The price point's amazing. Head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com if you're in the market for something for EDC or hunting, fishing, something around the job site, around the house. They've definitely got you covered. All right, let's get to today's podcast with Mark from Amsoil, talking about conventional semi-synthetics, full synthetics, the differences between them, pros and cons, and which one you should choose for your truck. Mark, welcome back to the Diesel Podcast. I enjoyed chatting with you about Amsoil products and all the cool things that are going on, and then asking you listener questions that we get. So when I think of oil, coolant, tons of different things we've chatted about, most of those questions come from the audience. So I'm sure I'll have some more for you today.
That's awesome. Thanks a lot, Patrick, for being here.
We were chatting about oil and a new product that you guys have, and I thought maybe we could step back to start and talk about the different classes of it, like conventional and semi-synthetic and synthetic, and ask you for how would you explain it to somebody who is interested in this topic but doesn't know a lot? They're wanting to absorb some information. What is the difference between all three?
So let's start with conventionals. It's still, from a diesel perspective, it still dominates 80% of the marketplace. It's because Grandpappy still, that's what they told all their kids to use, and their kids told their grandkids to use it. I mean, and it's relatively inexpensive still. But the conventional oils, although specifications have improved over the years, still provides about the lowest level of performance that you can get from engine oils. You can get them API licensed, so at least you'll have some idea that it meets some standards that the engine manufacturers are looking for. But it's going to provide your lowest level of performance in engine oils. Then you can take a step up into the synthetic blend, the semi-synthetic, the parasynthetic world. That's something that I'd like to say was designed by formulators and chemists, but I feel like it's more designed by marketers of engine oil products, because when you get into that blend world, there's not a lot of guidance that tells you what it has to be. So you physically could have a blend that you market that could be 99% conventional, 1% synthetic, or it could be 1% conventional, 99% synthetic. Now, you'd be a fool to market it as a blend if it's 99% synthetic, but my point is there's no guidance when you get into the synthetic blend world. Now, I will tell you that there are chemistry companies out there that sell additive packages for formulations that say that blends are, in order to be API licensed, are 15% or less. So the majority of your blends that are out there are somewhere between probably 1 and 15, if they have the API donut on the bottle. Now you'd say, well, what does 5% synthetic content do to 95% conventional base oil? Very little, actually, but they're doing it to demonstrate improvements in pour point and cold crank viscosity, so that some synthetic content can improve those, cold weather type attributes that you may be looking for. Do they do the same job as a full synthetic? Not even close. But they do a little bit better job than a conventional. So there's something to market there. And it's an improvement over conventionals and a step to get you closer to using full synthetic. That's likely what most marketers are trying to get people to do. Buy something that's has a little bit more than a conventional. It's a little bit more price than a conventional, but not near the performance nor the price of a full synthetic.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of I don't know. Depends on who markets it and what formula they have. Will depend on the performance they provide for you. Then you step up into full synthetic land, and then you get all of the benefits of synthetic base oil. Longer oil life, better oxidation resistance, better cold temperature properties, better viscosity control, lower oil consumption, and the list kind of continues, right? But there's price points at each phase. Conventional has a price point. The blends have a price point a little bit over conventionals because it's a little bit better. And then you step up into the synthetic world, and that has a higher price point yet.
When Amsoil was looking at this new product, what were some focuses with, I think, the chemistry, the benefits, the things that a truck owner would look at and say, I need this in my engine. This is what I'm looking for. How'd you guys approach it?
Right. So I mean, maybe we should unleash the fury to the public to say that we actually came out with a blend. We stepped into this realm, and ours is it's a 1540 still, but it has a real high content of synthetic base oil, much more than 15%. In fact, we market it as more than 50%. And we did this for a couple reasons. One, we're a synthetic company. That's where our roots come from. We deviate from that very rarely. We do not play in the conventional lubricant realm all that frequently. So we wanted to make sure that our blend spoke to the roots of the company. It's going to be real high performance. It's going to be better than your other blends that you're going to see in the marketplace. And we do that because we want the customer to get something for what they're paying for. Now it's lower cost than a full synthetic, and that's the reason we got into this blend market. We don't feel that we can compete with the conventionals that are out there. It just doesn't speak to our brand so much. But we can provide some performance in the blend market and really dial that into what consumers would want to pay for if they're looking for a blend. So we went after it from we're going to give you great performance in the blend market, but we're going to try to compete with and be more maybe more price conscious for those that don't want to buy a full synthetic. And we're going to compete price point in the other blends that are in the marketplace, but we still can't quite compete yet with conventionals. But we're hoping that people will come to the higher performance side of life, get into the blend market with our product, see those benefits, and then maybe that's as far as they go, or maybe that's the stepping stone even for them to get them into the full synthetic market.
That's a really good approach to it. When you were mentioning that, I thought back to my personal experience with Amsoil, and this was way before the podcast. This was a long time ago, and it was a truck that I had built for as a street truck, something to have fun with. And there was somebody in the racing world that I looked up to, had the same truck, and I said, what would you credit towards keeping your motor together? Because it was making good power, stock rods, everything else. And he said, I really think part of it is the oil, and I run Amsoil. So I took word of mouth referral, and I said, I'm going to use it too. And it sort of opened the gateway to, well, what else can I use this for? I want to protect the transmission, the differentials, the coolant, all these other things. And I find that's part of the journey of being an enthusiast. Is I was the same way. I had a Cummins, so I would go get, the oil at Mopar and change it myself, and then I wanted more, and I started to go down this journey of, well, I'm running a different turbo and different injectors and a built transmission. Can I get better fluids? So I see that as a really cool gateway to be able to step into that world of, you want to protect your investment, and oil is such a key part of it. I know we've mentioned on the podcast before, it's one of the really kind of hot button topics of, which brand, what weight, what's the interval that I can change it at. And it's really cool to learn about it.
It's the critical piece of your investment, really. And I'm not just saying that because I work for Amsoil. It's that engine doesn't run without lubrication. And like you said, you want to invest in a product that protects your investment. Now, whether that's your modified truck, which you have sunk a lot of money into, or whether it's a brand new truck off the lot, which they're selling for $100,000, that's crazy. You want to protect the investment that you have, that you're driving around in. And the oil, the lubricants, transmission differential, engine, coolants, well, you name it, they all do that. And, let's be fair, the OEMs they're not, from a lubricants perspective, they're looking out for their best interest under the warranty period. After the warranty period's over, they really don't care. Now, we look out for you and whether your vehicle is in warranty or out of warranty. And we want your equipment to last as long as possible. And in order to do that, providing the best chemistry you can put into each one of those holes helps guarantee that you will, see as long a life out of that as possible.
That's one of the really key things I think we've touched on before on the podcast, and I've taken away as something to remember is, the OEM trucks, they're designed for a purpose, a use, a power number, a towing weight, a payload weight, and a lot of the capabilities, well, the desires that the truck owner has for capabilities can exceed that, whether it's longevity, they want to keep it for a while. And the OEM components may not be designed for that, like you mentioned with the warranty period and things like that. So I think that's where a product like this and other ones that we've covered before, and I'm sure we'll talk about today, really step into that, to fill that role that somebody says, I love this truck. I want to keep it way past the 3-year, 36,000 mile or 5-year, 100,000 mile warranty period. And I want this to last for 10 to 15 to 20 years. And there's so much capability in, like today we're chatting about oil, that you can get. I think one of the natural questions that comes up with that is, okay, now what kind of filter do I need to use with this product? So from the filtration standpoint, would somebody just use a regular OEM filter with the SemiSynthetic, or what's the opinion or the approach you guys take?
Yeah, when we launched this product, we pushed it towards OEM service intervals. So that it could completely replace either the blend that they're using today, the conventional that they're using today, and it doesn't change their maintenance behaviors or habits.
Okay.
Will it provide additional life beyond the OEM service interval? There's no question. We have data that substantiates that. But we put the OEM interval in there just to make it simple for the consumer. If the consumer wants to do something longer than that by choice, they can use oil analysis to do so. If the consumer does it by accident, as in, oh man, I forgot that maintenance interval. I just got busy. I'm on a job. I just can't do it. Or, this stuff happens all the time. We build in reserve protection for the people that either make mistakes or intentionally skip that interval because they need another 3,000, 5,000 miles of service out of it until they can get back to their shop or whatever else it is, right? But with respect to your filtration question, because that product was built for OE service intervals, we would pair it with, an OE service interval capable filter. We obviously sell Amsoil filters that are capable of much longer than OEM service intervals, and those filters provide additional benefits over just longevity. They provide filtration efficiency. and that's removing very small particles at a very high efficient rate. So that's the ultimate performance for your engine is, hey, it's capable, so service life capable, and it provides really great filtration. When you step down in terms of a filter's performance, you're going to sacrifice efficiency, and you're going to sacrifice capacity, which is the service life of the filter. Now, if you're just changing at OEM service intervals, well, you don't need a filter that has long capacity. It's a waste for you. But you do step back in the efficiency, which means that a lower price point, lower OEM service life capable filter is not going to remove the same particle sizes as efficient as a higher end filter would. And if you think about, byproducts of combustion, contaminants sucked in through your air filter, potential wear metals from your engine, all of those are detrimental to your engine. The filter is there to try to remove those so that they don't cause, abrasive wear in the engine, further causing damage. So yes, we will pair an OEM filter, say from Wix or Donaldson or somebody, right? Decent filter yet, but just built for OEM service intervals. We would recommend that just from a price point. It makes sense for the customer. But if they wanted to have a better filtration option, Amsoil has its own product line of filters that you could use even at the OEM interval.
It's it's a great topic that I wanted to ask you about, which it might separate a bit from the oil that we're chatting about today and get into some of the other ones that Amsoil has. But a topic that I'd say is really generates people's interest is the extended service intervals of their oil. What are some things, if they do want to go to 15, 20, 25,000 or more, that they need to do to be able to do that, both with the selection of the oil, also with the filter, maybe some other things that they need to do to safely extend those service intervals?
Right. There's definitely a safe way to do it, and there's a reactive way to do it. I would hope that people would choose the safe way because the reactive way typically ends up costing you money. So let's say you're currently changing your oil at 10,000 miles, for example, and you want to simply go to a maybe one oil change a year interval, and you estimate that you put on 15 or 20,000 miles in that year. Well, there's a few ways you can do it. You can either buy an oil at a higher price point that has much more performance, that's capable of your 20,000 miles or 1 year, and never worry about it. That's what's warranted from who you bought it from. Amsoil has those products. Or you can use your current product. Let's say it's a conventional, it's only warranted to the OEM interval. You can use oil analysis to help document your oil's performance and the health of your engine beyond that OEM interval, which requires you then at that OEM interval, say 10,000 miles, you take an oil sample, you send it in and have a lab analyze it, and then you have to be able to read the results of that report and then make determinations on the life of the oil and how your engine's doing. And that's the hard part, right? Is I've looked at oil analysis for the better part of a decade, and I'm good at that. But it takes time to be able to know what you're looking at, how to read individual values and how they correlate to other values, which tests that are particularly important to look at, which ones are less important to look at. So reading an oil analysis report is not like going to the store and picking up a gallon of milk. It's not that simple. But it is a tool that you can use. And there's some guidance out there online that people have tried to distill a report and provide you some insight. Amsoil, certainly, you could pick up the call and talk to our technical service representatives, and they would be happy to go through your oil analysis report and give you some guidance. You could certainly send that report to me, and I would give you guidance, no question. But you have to learn how to use that report to then tell you that the oil that is currently designed for OEM service intervals is capable of something longer. And if you're going to try to go from 10 to 20, my recommendation is you're probably going to take a sample at 10, and then you're probably going to take a sample at 15, and then you probably change it at 20 and take a final sample to tell you what it looked like. That's your first go at it. And then what you learn from those 3 samples, you can trend, and then you can say, well, let's say the oil looked good at 15, or maybe beyond 15. Let's say it was good at 15, but at 20 it was marginal. Well, you're going to say, well, let's run the oil up to 15 again at the next one. Then we're going to take a sample at 17 and a half and change it and look at that value. And then maybe that determines that your service life on this truck is 17,500. But that's not a forever thing. That's the thing. If you do that, as your truck accumulates miles, are you doing things to make sure that your injectors are staying clean, your combustion chambers staying clean, so that the deposits, don't form and you don't get byproducts of combustion that, increase over time. Like, there's a lot of things that make this complicated, but you're going to want to take a sample maybe every other oil change to make sure that when you settled on 1750, that continues to happen, and that the oil is still capable of protecting your engine at 1750 as the engine, grows in age, grows in miles, et cetera, et cetera.
How does the oil filter itself factor into those extended intervals? Are there different types that are designed for that versus taking an OEM filter and trying to extend it to 20,000 or 25 or 15?
Right. So your OEM filters are truly designed for OEM intervals. Do they have reserve capacity beyond the OEM interval? Sure. It could depend a little bit on the vehicle and how it's running. The vehicles that have on the gasoline side, the vehicles that have cylinder deactivation, your GMs and Rams,
Yeah.
a filter will struggle to get to an OEM interval. But so there's situations in which you could have some issues with OEM filters even within the OEM service interval. But the OEM filter is not designed for real long life. It's not its intention. It was never designed for that, and its price point is commensurate for that. So if you're going to go beyond the OEM interval, they're going to recommend you change your filter at the OEM interval, put a new filter on, and then go beyond that with your oil, take some samples, et cetera, right? In which, you're probably shaking your head saying, well, why would I go underneath the truck, change a filter, and not change the oil at the same time? And I can't dispute that logic. I mean, that's why a lot of people, typically don't do oil analysis on conventional oils and using OEM designed filters for long service life. It's kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah.
You got to change a filter at the OEM, but my oil may be capable of longer. I think that there's probably a better solution, and it's the better solution is, well, why don't I just go to an oil that's more capable without the oil analysis, and a filter that's more capable without having to change it at the OEM service interval. So what you'll find is that people will get frustrated with that earlier method, and they will just move up to synthetics with a higher capacity, higher capable oil filter, and change it at the synthetics warrantable filter or for warrantable oil change life. So
Gotcha. So if somebody was going to do this to make sure that I understand, is you would pick, I'd say that oil analysis is key in this process and establishing a record of it based on how you drive the truck, how many miles, what year it is, how much idle time you have, all these other factors. If you're running fuel additives, tons of different things into it, and then selecting an oil and a filter that works with it and just establishing almost that baseline for your particular truck and going through that process versus maybe jumping into it a little too quick, or taking somebody else's recipe and applying it towards your truck, which may have a different driving style, different conditions, a whole bunch of other factors.
Right. It's actually, aside from those people that can afford to spend $100,000 on a brand new turbo diesel pickup, um, people are buying some sort of used truck, right? It's got questionable miles on it, questionable maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. Um, Doing an oil sample is a great recommendation because, again, you may not care so much about the oil itself, but what you care about is what the engine looks like, or transmission for that matter. And the oil analysis will give you an indication of what that engine looks like. What's the health of that engine? The transmission sample, what's the health of that transmission? And then you can, without knowing the maintenance history of this vehicle, you'll be able to say, yeah, there's no contaminants. My air filtration system looks good. I have very little wear metals. Hey, this engine is doing well. Hey, I'm not seeing a lot of soot in my engine oil. Hey, the rings in the liner must be in pretty good health because I'm not getting a lot of blow-by. So an oil analysis is one of those things that it's actually a really good tool that you can use to give you an idea of what's the health of this truck. Maybe you do it on an annual basis just, to give yourself a pat on the back and say, hey, I'm doing a good job protecting my truck.
What are some things that you would tell somebody to really pay attention to if they do an oil analysis, as far as, hey, there could be a problem developing? What are, a handful or things that you look for when somebody sends you one?
So you're going to get a report, and it's going to have a bunch of colors on it. And that's typically what gets people excited. On the top of the oil analysis report, it's green, yellow, orange, or red. And those colors can be a little bit misleading if you don't know what's underneath all those colors. And that's why I was saying that a report's not as easy as going and picking up a gallon of milk at a gas station. Like, you got to know what you're looking at. And the things that are important are, you're looking at what's your viscosity of your engine oil. Viscosity can be altered by fuel dilution. It can be altered by shear of your engine. It can be altered by high temperature operation and oxidation. So there are things that you want to look at with respect to viscosity, but as soon as you look at that first number, you're going to say, all right, that's either within a 40 weight range or it's something else. And then you're going to start looking as to why it might be different. If it's low, well, I'm going to look next door to say, hey, do I have a bunch of fuel dilution in this? Do I have water in this? If it's high, you're going to say, well, what is my oxidation value? Is it because of that? So viscosity is a first place you're going to look, and then you're going to start looking at, well, do I have contaminants? Do I see dirt in this oil? Do I see coolant in this oil? Because that will drive either maintenance direction on, hey, you need to address your air filter or just your intake, or if you got coolant in your system, well, you got some bigger problems. So you might be turning some wrenches over the weekend, but and then you're going to start looking at, well, how do my wear metals look at? It's going to give you values of iron and chromium and aluminum and copper and all these metallics that you find in the system. And you're going to say, well, the report will tell you based on your engine type and a database of data whether you fall within normal ranges of that engine type. But you can see whether your wear rates are higher than others in the lower 48.
When you see those wear items that are higher, or those categories, what this is kind of a loaded question, because I'm not sure there's a direct answer for it. But if you see them higher, is there a way to slow that? Is there a way to, I don't want to say eliminate it, because I'm sure there's so many variables as to how far it's gone. But I'm thinking of somebody who just did, they bought this used truck, they do an oil analysis, they see some of these things, maybe they're questionable, and they think, okay, well, do I need to go visit an engine builder now, or can I run a higher quality oil with better filtration and maybe slow this or stop some of the common type wear that an engine will see?
Right. That is a hugely loaded question, because all engines will wear at a little bit different rate, and it can be because the clearances that were originally built in the engine. It can be what oil had been used over the life of the engine. It can be how the person is using the engine. There's a difference between, me just running around in an empty truck, using it as a grocery getter versus me pulling 30,000 pounds all the time. And wear rates will be different. So how do you quote unquote stop or slow wear rates? Well, there's really two methods. You use the best oil possible, and you use the best filtration system possible. And that may actually mean that the full flow filter on the engine isn't enough. It actually means that you install what we call a bypass filter that will filter the oil down to much finer particles and remove them, which can cause abrasive wear. So if you set up your engine with the best oil possible and the best filtration possible, you're providing that engine the best chance of the lowest wear rates. Now, again, depending on how you're using it, depending on the engine and how it was built, one engine off the line and the engine following it off the line are not the same, even though they're the same truck. They're not built the same. Everything's got tolerances and parts, and they all wear a little bit differently. But you can slow the wear rates to engines by using the best products possible. I don't know that you can eliminate that stuff, right? There's always going to be conditions in which, you can shock load an engine and you'll get an intermittent period in which, something happens, and you'll get some wear metals that come in a solution. All engines will wear every rotation that they go round and round. It's just your job, and the products you choose to put in that engine are ultimately important to try to reduce that wear as much as possible.
Makes a lot of sense. And I think for those truck owners that are using their trucks really hard, maybe even more so than an OEM designed the truck to be used for, there's a lot of people like that use them for work and hot shotting and tons of different things like that, where something like this could really benefit them long term. When I think of engine wear, I always thought of it different. I always thought of, well, I'm pushing power, I'm going to break a hard part, and then I'm doing an engine build. I didn't think of constant wear just being the nature of the beast and things I could do beforehand to maybe affect how, lower the wear that I have in paying attention to it. So I think it's a really good insight that you had mentioned, not just for the wear, but then also the oil itself and oil analysis and how this all, kind of factors into it. But it kind of goes back to that trend I mentioned at the beginning of, one, if you buy a new truck, they're very expensive. And how can I make it last? How can I do what I can to not have to buy one so soon? Or it's that older truck where maybe it is a dream truck. Maybe somebody always wanted an 0659 or an LBZ Duramax, or they always wanted that 7.3 Powerstroke, and they get it, and you have to start fresh and really see what is the engine telling you with the oil analysis, and then what products and filtration or even a bypass filter factors into extending the life and giving you the best performance. So that's a lot to think about, and something I'll
That's
probably
deep.
that's
deep.
something I'll probably do on my next truck is do something like that.
It makes me think that I should go take some oil samples out of my vehicles right now. I feel like I've neglected them. And if you haven't lately, shame on you.
I haven't done. I can't say I've ever done an oil analysis, and it's something I should probably do.
Your vehicle's crying at you right now.
Well, it was awesome to chat with you, Mark. I always enjoy the conversations because there's so much technical information in the way that you talk about it. I can understand it and process it and say, okay, I've got some good takeaways to be able to approach engine oil, or last time we've talked about coolant. and transmission fluid. So it was great to catch up with you. I appreciate you explaining those things, telling us about a new product that we can use if we're, want something better or more capable than an OEM type of fluid. And really kind of the growth of truck ownership, which is something recently I've been really focusing on, is how we start in the process of, we just get this truck, and then 5 years from now, what are we doing with it? 10 years from now, what are we doing with it? And the process we go through as truck enthusiasts. So it was fantastic to chat with you.
That's good. It's a lot of fun. Thanks.
Don't forget, diesel fans, make sure and head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code 20diesel for 20% off site-wide. It's an exclusive code just for Diesel Podcast listeners. We appreciate Kershaw offering that to you guys. So if you're in the market to get a new EDC knife or something for hunting, fishing, something to use at the job site or around the house, they've definitely got you covered. They've got a bunch of new models for 2023. Their Duralock models, which are brand new, are really cool. I've got a couple of them myself, and they use D2 blade steel. And then there's a bunch of different grip textures. So, really, no matter what you like as far as, type of feel, in the hand, they've got a bunch of choices. So if you're in the market, head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code 20diesel. You can save 20% off site-wide on the Duralock models or anything else that they offer. I also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters, Tyler Loewen at 23 Diesel, John, J. Cole. We appreciate all of our Patreon supporters, all of you who are on, subscribers on YouTube and podcast apps, Spotify, joined our Discord, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. We appreciate all your support here in year 7 of the Diesel Podcast, and we love to hear you guys' suggestion for shows, guests, topics, things like that. So if you have one, make sure and reach out to us. Let us know. We'd love to be able to get your suggestion onto a future podcast. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.